Hi, my name is Scott Imbrie. I'm part of a study at the University of Chicago. It's called Brain-Computer Interface. I control a robotic arm and hand with my brain, and we also do sensory feedback in this study. I became part of this study in 2020 because in 1985 I was in a bad car accident and I shattered C4, 5, and 6 of my spinal cord. I was told I was going to be a complete quadriplegic. With the grace of God, I was able to walk out of Northwestern Memorial Hospital in the Shirley Ryan Rehabilitation Institute. And so I always wanted to give back to people that were less fortunate than me. Since 1987, I've been trying to find a spinal cord injury research program, and it's really hard to qualify for such studies. And in 2020, I found such study at the University of Chicago. So the study that I'm involved in, we have, as you can see, I have 2 pedestals on my head, and connected to those pedestals are 4 electrodes. I have 2 electrodes on the S1 cortex and 2 electrodes on the motor cortex. The 2 electrodes that are for the motor cortex each have 64 pins. So for motor control, I have a total of 128 channels of control. And with the sensory electrodes, the 2 of them, each one has 32 pins, so I have 64 channels that they can stimulate on my brain that makes me have sensation on my fingertips of my right hand. The sensation is anywhere from the thumb, the index finger, middle finger, and ring finger. And some of the sensations I get are just at the surface of the fingertips, and other ones may be at the surface and below, and then sometimes I feel sensation just below the surface. And it's kind of amazing because each channel, when they stimulate it, has a very unique sensation. And the amazing thing is, over the last 3.5 years that I've been part of this study, the areas that I feel the sensation at haven't changed really at all. They're very stable. And with the stimulation that they give me, they can change the way I perceive things. They can change frequency, they can change the intensity or the magnitude that they stimulate me. I believe, if I'm correct, that they stimulate me anywhere from all the way down as low as 2 milliamps, which I really, maybe 1 or 2 channels I can maybe feel that at. I know there's a couple channels I definitely feel it at like around 5 milliamps, but it's more like between 10 milliamps and maybe 50 milliamps. So it's the average. Some of them they can try to stimulate all the way up to 90 milliamps, and I really don't feel much at all. But even that's staying very stable because every month well, now it's every quarter, we go and test all the channels to see if there's much change. So there's a really amazing fact about this whole thing. I had Jan, one of the people from the Pittsburgh study, share this with me. She told me when I got to talk to her on the phone, she said, "Scott, you'd be amazed to know that there's been more people in outer space than that has an opportunity to partake in this study, that qualify for this study." And so I did a little research this morning before I came here, and there's been 670 people that have been in outer space according to Google. And there are approximately 67 people who have had brain implants. Now, a majority of the brain implants for the BCI program, I should say, brain computer interface, have been for speech, to help people be able to speak. Now there's a total of 9, I believe, to date that have the ability to receive sensation and control robotic arm or hand. There's only 9 of us, and I am the only person that has natural sensation on my fingertips, so they can do unbelievable studies with me that they can't do with anyone else in the world. And they could do mechanical stimulation. They could read my brain waves when they're stimulating my fingertips with an indenture machine. And then they can have me make comparisons with this brain stimulation compared to the mechanical stimulation, so they could accurately be able to judge how to control the brain stimulation to make it real to life. So it's so much fun being part of. So it's really amazing being part of this study, because even though I don't have a background in science, I love science when I was in high school, but I'm not educated in science per se. But over the past 3.5 years, I've learned a lot of technical terminology that the scientists use being part of this study. And at the same time, as I learn their language and the procedures they're performing on me, I also have to learn a way to communicate with them, to explain to them how I'm perceiving things. Because even though they're running the studies and everything, they're just they can just imagine what I'm going through. So it's very important for me when I'm explaining things to them. For instance, if you take and press your finger really hard on a surface and you feel sensation on the back of your nail, that's the pressure you feel. And sometimes when they stimulate certain channels, I get that sensation, that pressure sensation. So I have to figure out ways to tell the scientists how I'm perceiving them. And how I go about doing that is I start touching things around me after they stimulate each channel, so I could give them a description of how I'm perceiving it. So the researchers were telling me, one of the gentlemen at the University of Chicago, Nico, and I'm not going to try to say his last name, but Nico has been doing this BCI research with primates, non-human primates, since around 1985. So I am very appreciative of all the animals that came before me, because without the research on them, there's no way that the FDA would ever allow these things to be done to humans. And my hope is that someone that's a lot worse off than I am physically will have an opportunity to have some sense of pride, because they can care for themselves and they're not dependent on someone else to take care of them. So I'm very excited that I have an opportunity to come out here to the University of Washington and meet all these fantastic scientists and everything. So many of them have worked with non-human primates for a very long time. And sometimes when they're doing studies with them, particularly with brain control interface and brain stimulation, they could take all the data that they're collecting from those primates and make a really good determination of what they're perceiving and everything, what the non-human primates are perceiving. But the one thing the monkeys can't tell them is how they perceive the stimulation. And so I maybe could be the voice for those non-human primates. Kelly was just talking to me, and she was asking about one of her new non-human primate, or one of the primates, non-human primates she's working with, has recently been getting brain stimulation. He was doing fine doing the study for a couple hours, and then all of a sudden, he didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore. So I suggested to her that when I first started getting the brain stimulation, sometimes it became like um, overwhelming, not like in a painful way or anything, but it was like the repeated stimulation. And imagine if you tapped your finger on something really hard for a while. Your finger kind of gets dull, the sensation dulls, it gets numb, it gets irritating. And that's what I would say. It's not painful, it just gets irritating. And so what I learned when they were doing this with me is that in the beginning especially, I myself got a little overwhelmed and I said, okay, let's do this for a little bit, then let's change to do something else. But as time went on, I built up a resilience and it wasn't tough anymore. But it was just in the very beginning to compute all this stuff in my mind, that's the way it felt. And then after a while, it was just normal. So I'd like to share with you all the part of the reason I joined this study. Well, it's not really the only reason or anything, but when I saw controlling a robotic arm with your brain on the NIH website, it was super amazing. I'm like, yeah, that would be so cool, controlling a robotic arm with your brain. So it's so much fun sitting in my chair, and even though I can move my right arm and my hand a little bit, it's so much fun sitting in the chair just like I am here, not moving a muscle, and just imagining moving my hand and arm and being able to control this like it was really mine. So, anyways, when the University of Chicago was talking to me over the phone, and I had my sister and my brother-in-law, since I really depend on them for a lot of things. I didn't need their permission to become part of this study, but I wanted their support with me doing this study. And so we were on the phone with all the different scientists from Pittsburgh and from the University of Chicago, and I had no interest in or care about what I was going to go through having this surgery or what the results were going to be or anything else. I just knew I wanted to be part of this study. So, but my sister and my brother-in-law, who's a family practitioner, they asked really pertinent questions about, what kind of care am I going to have to help my brother with? What are some of the dangers and everything? Like things that I would have never thought of because I didn't care. I was going to do this study no matter what. So anyway, so then we have the surgery a couple months later, and we start this whole process. I had the surgery on October 27th of 2020, which was a Tuesday. The following Monday, I was in the lab for the first time. Here I got like 15 people in this little tiny room, and the first thing and everyone's in a mask because it's during COVID. And they come up to me after they hook up the stuff to the computer, and they start rubbing my fingers with a Q-tip, and you hear this noise, and everyone's like jumping for joy, and the smiles on their faces, I could see it as clear as day, even though they had masks on, and so they knew it was a success, the surgery. And that was the beginning of my journey. It was really super awesome. Thank you, animals, for being in my life or being in our lives to help us out.